It's been over 1400 days since I first started epicseven, and there's something that I've always wanted to do. With thousands of RTA matches thrown, guild wars lost, accounts bricked, and rift runs failed, it's finally time for me to break down each and every single character in epicseven. This means we'll explore their playstyle, what their skills do, their possible builds, what I'll be using, their PvP/PvE use cases, and their pros and cons. But without further ado, let's get into it. Today we're going to be diving into one of the most flexible and oppressive units in epicseven, and of course I'm talking about Rinak. Whether you're cleaving, building units, building tank compositions, or you're looking for a reliable guild wars hero, Rinak is doing it all right now. With that, I'll be breaking down builds, team compositions, and why some people are even running 2 Rinaks currently. But with that all out of the way, let me first introduce you to Rinak and how she's been since her initial launch. Truthfully, she's finally settled into a great spot in terms of arena and guild war. Her special is her insane flexibility, and that isn't just in terms of her stats, but rather her playstyle as well, where she doesn't always even necessarily need to be 300 speed, as she can instead also be played slow, while additionally not necessarily being stuck in arena or guild war specifically. She even has some uses in PvE too. Before we move forward though, I do want to highlight one of the main features and one of the greatest strengths, and that's the fact that her base speed is 129 the second that you get her, and this is deceptively strong, as again this allows you to cheat a lot of free stats, both in terms of her being slower and her just having free speed while being able to stack some other stats into HP or attack. And of course it does allow her to bridge team compositions like Sharoon or other speed units as well, given that she's so fast and she can more likely take the first turn in a match, which again can be extremely helpful. Next, I'd like to talk about her skills, as you might not be familiar with how good or exactly what they do. So let's start first with their S3, which is honestly the core ability that you'll want to focus on here. Now to start, her S3 is a defense penetrating, insanely powerful one-shot nuke type ability, but in addition to this ability also deals 7,000 fixed damage to all targets, while also ignoring effect resistance when it comes to stunning herself. Kind of a blessing or a curse depending on how you see the rest of her kit. Next we have her S2, which I do think is pretty cool, since the pilfer and spoils does allow you to steal stats from a single target, and it also does grant you an extra turn while also providing you an attack buff and also pushing back an enemy all in the same turn. Now I do want to make the comment that the soul burn effect and the ignore of resistance here isn't nearly as insane or impactful as you'd think, as honestly a lot of the times you just want to steal the stats from an enemy with pilfer and provide Rinak the spoils, and in that case the combat readiness push 40% is sometimes not nearly as crazy as you think. But it is worth mentioning that in some cases you can dispel all the buffs from an enemy while also pushing back them by 40%. Now in addition to this, we have to talk about her S1, which is a decent damage dealing ability, but honestly if you're low on molas between her S2 and her S1, I'd say that both of these abilities are things that I wouldn't upgrade, especially since just her S3 is pretty good by itself if you're trying to build Rinak on a budget. Now let's go over Rinak and some of the builds that people are using right now, then we'll showcase a bit of her gameplay through the different modes that she's viable in. Now the current most popular build with Rinak that you're probably used to seeing at this point is her stacked all with attack and being fast, and this is the 270 to 300 or faster sort of build with a primary focus on attack, ranging from anything like 3.5k to 4,000 attack depending on your stats. And to talk about that build specifically, it is helpful to use that build when pairing her alongside characters like Sharoon or even someone like MLTU, as both of them synergize quite nicely with her. But then we have the mid-speed 250 to 260 range for Rinak, and that does lead her with a combination of things like additional attack that she can slot into, or 20,000 HP that is a bit more of a bridge that can tank and not die the second that they load into the game. Now personally I've seen that build do very well for players that just for one reason or another don't have the speed, but in addition to that I have found that players that play the game a bit slower or haven't focused too much on RTA have relegated their Rinak to that build, as honestly you don't really need the speed if you're trying to fight someone in arena or in guild war as opposed to RTA, as in most cases you already know what speeds, or you have a good idea of what speeds the enemy is going to be when you load into the match. Now the final build that I've seen is the super tank version, which is the 230 or slower build, and this is a 25k HP monster that typically pairs well with young Senya team compositions and is often considered the villager or slow dealing with Harseti answer in most cases. That team composition of course is very good for arena or guild war whenever you encounter it. But next I'd like to mention that there are a few builds that use things like Secret Artstorm, which can be really cool, or if you're on the receiving end of this guild war / arena cheese extremely annoying. Regardless of all this though, it is noteworthy that it's possible for Rinak to really be on any of the builds that I just mentioned before, and because of that, she's one of the most common characters you'll see in Epic 7 right now, regardless if this is a character that a lot of people aren't super happy with, as it really does feel like everyone is just playing Rinak at the moment. Next, in terms of team synergy, she's definitely very good with characters like Sharoon, especially if your Sharoon has high effectiveness and you're able to guarantee get this combo off. But in case if you're curious about why Sharoon works specifically with Rinak, Sharoon's S2 reads that at the end of someone's turn, when an ally is inflicted with a debuff which prevents movement, grants Cascade to all allies and dispels all debuffs which prevents movement before increasing the combat readiness of the caster by 40%. Now, if this by itself was all that it did, that's fine. However, because she gains 4,000 fixed damage in the form of Cascade and provides this to all allies in her team, in addition to a combat readiness push that definitely takes her to the front of the line in most cases, while also being able to use her S3, which allows her to provide a class specific debuff. And in the era of Epic 7, currently there's a lot of knights that are currently being picked. This means that with her S3, she is often defense breaking enemies. It essentially means that for Sharoon and Rinak will get stunned, push up Sharoon can then push back a bunch of enemies by 20%, debuff, and in most cases defense break enemies at the same time, and this is extremely powerful regardless of what sort of team composition that you're seeing her in. Next, if you're someone that picked up Young Senya from a while ago, you've probably also seen Rinak be paired with Young Senya, and this is just because of Young Senya's passive, which does allow her to gain additional fighting spirit, assuming that the front ally on the team is an earth hero. Now, to be clear, this ability for Young Senya to take a turn and be able to cleanse and heal with her S3 is extremely powerful, but let's not forget the fact that she does also offer a dual attack on her S1 in addition to a combat readiness push, which again can be helpful depending on the team composition. Now, of course, in terms of what Young Senya is most well known for, she is a very good answer to Harseti, and if you're someone that needs to deal a lot of damage and counter a Harseti composition, long gone are the days of only being able to use someone like Alencia or Mort, as now if you want to pick things up a little bit quicker, you can use someone like Rinak to strip, steal stats from, and also nuke an entire team at the same time. Finally, I do have a special shout out here for Boss Arunka, and although mine looks a little bit different as I'm using her a bit differently for my cleave, she is also a very good character to pair with Rinak, as in RTA specifically, if you have someone like Rinak with Boss Arunka, well, it means that the enemy team isn't locking you into specifically hitting just Boss Arunka, and it does allow you to nuke enemies depending on who they are pretty easily, especially if they don't have access to characters like Fallen Cecilia or any other character that would otherwise punish someone like Rinak when using her S2 into S3. Now, as a final disclaimer, I do want to say that Arunka and Rinak are also really powerful together, as it's sometimes difficult to tell what sort of build or playstyle both Rinak and Arunka are going to, as again, there are a few people that will play Rinak on some sort of slow build, and there are also people that will play Arunka and not necessarily use her on a counter build. Because of that, there's a bit of RNG and variance to the build or playstyle of these two characters together, and with that, I do highly recommend using this if you're someone that's playing something like Guild War or Arena more frequently, as it is a pretty difficult combo to deal with, especially if you're someone that doesn't have access to other MLs or limiteds that would make fighting against Arunka and Rinak a bit easier. Next, in terms of her viability in Guild War, there are a lot of people that are using Rinak on defense and on offense, depending on what your account has access to, but as I mentioned earlier, you will see this character often with characters like Arunka, sometimes Harseti, or even the occasional ML Hua-Young, as these are characters that definitely protect Rinak from getting one-shot, while also being pretty annoying to deal with in general, especially if you don't have access to a bunch of ML5s. For arena defenses, again, this is a character that has access to a lot of cheese artifacts, and as you can see from the list right now, even in just the top 10, already several teams that have Rinak in some sort of way, shape, or form included in their lineup. But I do also want to mention that in terms of arena, if you aren't fighting against some of the characters that do include characters like Harseti, it is definitely more common or more popular to use someone like Rinak in order to, again, guarantee Sharoon, defense break the enemy team, and then cleave or one-shot all the enemies from that point. For RTA, it should be no surprise that Rinak is one of the most popular characters right now, and regardless if you skip through to Challenger, if you skip through to Champion, Masters, Emperor, Legend, this is one of the most picked characters regardless of what rank or what sort of playstyle that you have access to, and in truth, it makes sense. She's very flexible, people like to use her a lot, and she does pair well with a majority of the current most popular cast, with a lot of players just taking with one of the most popular openings to RTA currently being Rinak plus Fallen Cecilia, and basically just bulldozing over the rest of the competition, as there's no way to otherwise punish the fixed damage that Rinak will deal to the enemy team. Finally, however, I do want to talk about the PvE for Rinak, as there are a few teams currently, courtesy of other creators and theory crafters for the game, that have found ways to use her in even something like boss fight like Nightmare Archon, and even the more personally annoying Julia V Council, especially if you don't have access to Gala, Ray, or another grass healer. Now, in terms of my own build, I do have Rinak at 310 speed. I have her own artifact, and I am running hit set, though I don't often get to make use of the hit set, as most of the times I either soul burn or it doesn't matter, as pilfer and spoils are not dictated by your effect resistance whatsoever. However, this is what I use currently, as I like to cleave with Rinak, but I do want to mention that if or whenever I use Rinak for PvE or for Guild War / Arena, I do end up changing her artifact quite a bit, and on some occasions I do end up putting on something like an HP boot or an attack boot if I want to deal more damage. On that note, I do want to say that I do try to often pair or use Rinak with some of the other characters on my cleave focused team, as she is fast and I do like playing fast in general. From what I found, she is definitely very powerful whenever paired with, again, Sharoon, but in addition to this, she is very nice and synergizes quite well with characters like Silverblade Araminta or even Requiem Ruana if you're focused more on a fast, speedier playstyle. With that, I also have been using Rinak even into teams like Fallen Cecilia and some of these other characters, and truth be told, although this is a counter, it's honestly not that big a deal for what it's worth. Based on what I experienced, I stunned the entire team. All the fixed damage did enough damage to kind of either stun or eliminate and bully the Fallen Cecilia's team even before she had the chance to take a turn, and after the fact, Sharoon was able to clean up alongside the stuns from Silverblade Araminta. Finally though, before we get to the gameplay part of the Rinak guide, I do want to say that I have some pros and cons to consider for Rinak if you're someone that's on the fence about pulling her. And for me currently, I believe that the pros for Rinak is that she's insanely flexible. She works at different speeds and with different builds. She synergizes with a lot of the meta characters, including characters like Sharoon, Young Senya, Silverblade Araminta, you name it, she's pretty good with them. She is a really good pick and quite common and popular even in content like Guild War, in Arena, defense and offense teams, or wherever you really want to use this character. But finally, though I didn't touch on it nearly as long as some of the other sections, she is pretty good for PvE, regardless if you necessarily need to play her in those scenarios. Finally though, I do want to talk about some of the cons for Rinak specifically, as you may have noticed by some of her play or through moments where you might have lost with Rinak specifically. From what I found, she is definitely a bit weaker against characters like Zio or Ilanov, and although she does have very flexible builds, it is worth noting that you do and will want some really premium or high quality gear on her, as especially if you're trying to run her in the faster sort of variation, 310 speed is not the easiest thing in the world, even if the character is 129 base speed. Additionally, in terms of investment, it is pretty important for her to at least have her S3 leveled, which in some way, shape, or form you could argue is a bit of a weakness, as she isn't just a character that you could just go +0 on. But finally, with what I mentioned about getting singled out or punished by characters like Zio or Ilanov, she is quite weak or susceptible to people playing multiple stealth units and then forcing Rinak specifically to hitting a target that you otherwise wouldn't want to hit and may benefit the enemy team. And so if you've been on the fence with Rinak, this is your sign to build her, pull for her, do whatever you want to her. But honestly, to summarize it all, she's strong solo. She's even better when you synergize her with some of her strongest partners, including Sharoon, Silverblade Araminta, or even Arunka. But more than anything else, guys, she is easily one of the most annoying and frustrating characters to fight against if you have her on your team. But unlike with a character like Harsetti, who sometimes can even punish your own team for picking her, she doesn't have that many flaws, even if you first pick her, as in most cases she's flexible enough where you can avoid some traps or some weaknesses when you pick Rinak. And so as a result, I definitely recommend you build or play her if you haven't. With that though, I'm going to play out the rest of the video with some of the fights and some of the content that I've been using Rinak with. Enjoy the rest of the video, and thanks for watching.
Ballsy, aren't we? Turning to cowardly tricks? Too bad, because I'm... Your eyes are clouded by greed. Let me wash it all away. For all the shattered names.
The stars' protection shines upon you.
I'll show you the truth in darkness.
I present you with a sacred trial. Rejoice in your humiliation.
For hope that will shine through the despair.
You won't even have time to struggle.
For all those fallen
children. I rise up to face you!
Come on! What's even the point in struggling? Is that all?
I didn't do this to you from a place of animosity.
Come on! Please, I can take you in my sleep. Consider this an honor. Trying to get away, are we? You can't outrun me.
From life into death. And death into life anew.
Raise your sword for me.
For those who cannot leave.
I know. No mercy. I never thought I'd end up using it here. That desperate. Do you get it? We are not the same.
Shall we dance to the right, then to the left? You're quite the dancer now.
Forgetting some. No, your place!
All your greed and brutality will be avenged by my hand!
Here, take my hand.
I'll try.
Ballsy, aren't we? Come on! What's even the point in struggling? Consider this an honor.
Watch and learn. Not even worth unleashing my power.
Don't let go of my hand.
Are you going to provide? Be afraid, sinner. Fear my judgment.
Ballsy, come on! What's even the point in struggling? Forgetting something? Turning to cowardly tricks? Too bad, cause I'm...
Did you do anything else?
Direct my arrows.
A level playing field. Alright. Show me what you can do. Whether you win or lose is determined in an instant.
Already.
Dare!
Is it time to draw my sword? There's no escape.
Now that you've met me, do you feel starstruck? Doing things the simple way is boring. This way is more fun.
Ballsy, aren't we? Come on! What's even the point in struggling? Consider this an honor. Turning to cowardly tricks? Too bad, cause I'm...
Watch and learn. To protect those I hold dear, I shall walk the path of carnage. That desperate to bleed? Huh. Is that all you've got?
Heretics will be punished. This is where the real fight begins!
I know. No mercy. Do you get it? We are not the same. You saw with your own eyes what happened here today.